Tonight, we've been talking about, this is technically week 5, but this is our 6th week in this study. And we have, for 6 weeks, been talking about what stops us from spreading the gospel. Then we talked for 2 weeks about what the gospel is and how we've rebelled against God, this good God that gave us everything that we have, these blessings, this beautiful world that we live in. And we rebelled against him and said, we know a whole lot more about this planet than you do. And because of that, we brought in death. And we were sentenced to hell because our sin demands that. That's the wages of our sin. And so Christ came because he loves us. And he lived in our place. And then he died in our place. And then he ultimately defeated death to give us hope beyond the grave. And so we talked about the gospel. And that's, of course, the most important 2 weeks we're going to study. And then last week we talked about the power and we looked at when Jesus left, he told us to go, but before he told us to go, he said you'll receive power to go. All right, so we get that power from communicating with God and talking to God and the Spirit dwelling inside of us. And so it's important that we have this power. We use this power when we go out and we talk to people about Jesus. All right, so now that we've got all that under us, tonight we're actually going to talk about what do I say, what do I do when it comes time. I know what the gospel is, right? We have debunked all these things, these reasons of what stops us from spreading the gospel. And so now that I know what the gospel is, now that I know I need to be praying more, prayer, as we've been talking about on Sundays as well, is the most important thing that we do to start anything, whether it's sharing the gospel, whether it's coming to church, whether it's going to work, whether it's eating a meal, whatever you're doing, you should be starting off in prayer because that is how we get in contact. We align ourselves with the Spirit, and we're going to talk about that a whole lot more in depth on Sunday, Lord willing. So we've gotten that. So what do we do? And I loved hearing all these stories because we had all these different stories of different conversations about Jesus and about inviting people to church and all this. And you from those stories we just heard, you should understand and take away from that. There's no formula on how to tell somebody about Jesus, right? There's no correct way. This is the only way to do it, and it's going to work. So tonight I want to talk about 3 things, and then I threw in a bonus on the back of things that we need to be doing when it comes to sharing the gospel. And no matter what you're doing, no matter if this is I know a couple of you said that these are people that you've known, and over time you've hit here and a little bit here and a little bit here. Jimmy tells a story of this one-time encounter of this guy that he talked, that his neighbor talks to, and he led him to Jesus in that one conversation. So every situation is different, but these are things that we need to be doing no matter who we're talking to, how long we have to talk to them. These are things we can be doing to make it a little bit easier on us. And again, no formula, no script that we need to be reading. In fact, we're going to look at the more of a script that we use, the harder time you're going to have leading somebody to Jesus, all right? So number 1, the first thing that we need to be doing is you need to be you, all right? When you're talking to somebody about Jesus, be you. And I know that sounds like a duh kind of statement. It sounds simple, but for some reason, and Thomas Rainer in the book, he explains this really well, and we talked about these spiritual exercises. Remember about how the more we practice things like prayer, sharing the gospel, which is evangelism, the easier it's going to get for us, the more comfortable we become in these things in our life. But when we start off with, especially when we're really nervous or when we doubt ourselves or we feel like we're not capable of telling somebody about Jesus, when we do muster up the courage to tell somebody about Jesus, it's like we have this alter ego and we become this different person. It's like we put on this act. Like we can be in conversation about somebody, and then when we start to tell them about Jesus, we all of a sudden get super script-y. Like it's like we're reading a track to somebody, and we're scared to mess up, and we're scared to make a mistake, and so we're very matter of fact and sound like we're reading off this list. We sound like a really bad car salesman. But it's important that when you're talking to somebody about Jesus, that you're yourself. All right. That person you're talking with has made a connection with you. And the reason you're having this conversation, there's something connecting you to, whether some random happenstance or whether you work with them or whatever. Something has drawn you two together to be in this conversation in that moment, not somebody else. So you don't need to act like somebody else. You were sent there for a reason because God was giving you this opportunity to speak to them. Right? They're interested in you. They're interested in what you're having to say, and they're not interested in you reading a script. All right? Your personal connection with somebody when it comes to talking to them about Jesus is really, really important. All right? A couple years ago, we had a rainbow vacuum salesman come to the house. Anybody ever had a rainbow vacuum salesman come to the house? All right, fun stuff. Dallas's cousin needed a favor. If you showed this vacuum 12 times, you get yours paid for free. And so Dallas, without asking me, lined this vacuum salesman up to come to our house. And apparently both the husband and the wife have to sit in and listen to this demonstration. All right? And so I'm really excited about it. I'm in a great mood. And we sit in the living room, and he's showing us this rainbow, and for an hour and a half, he reads off this script, basically. I mean, and he's not literally reading it, but he's said this so many times that it's scripted. He knows exactly what to say. He knows all the statistics of bed bugs, or not bed bugs, but dust bunnies and all this stuff. How many particles per million is sucked up through a rainbow. I mean, he knows. He goes through this whole list of stuff, and it's an hour and a half long of us just sitting there, and I'm in the worst mood ever because I'm thinking of all the stuff that I need to be doing, not watching this guy tell me how to run a rainbow. We've had a rainbow. I was born in the room with a rainbow, and we've had one ever since. I know more about it than he does. I just want him to leave, right? And so he's telling us all this and telling us about all this stuff. And then we get to the part of the presentation to where he says, all right, I've got a shampooer attachment, and I need to do a demonstration. And he asked, do you have any hard-to-get-out stains? All right, so I said, I have a 5-year-old. My house, the whole entire house is a hard-to-get-out stain. Like, you take your pick. You may remember this story. Do y'all remember the story? I was running through the house holding Hollis, and I hit a slick spot in the carpet because there's silly putty stuck in the carpet. And I had to make the decision, do I want to protect Hollis or protect my face? And I protected Hollis, and I hit the couch head on. You remember that whole story? Some of you weren't born yet. That's okay. But in our floor was a silly putty stain about that big around, where this is a completely different story. This is a lot of stories compounded in this one story, but that's how I live my life. We used to have a trampoline in our living room because we're good parents. And my son left silly putty on the trampoline, and it just trickled down into the carpet. And then when we moved the trampoline, we said, hey, there's a big blue silly putty stain in our living room. It matches the purple one in front of the couch. So anyways, he asked me, he says, hey, is there a hard-to-reach stain, a hard-to-get-out stain that you have in your carpet? And I said, hey, buddy, if that shampooer gets out that silly putty stain right there, me and you can have a conversation. And now I have a rainbow. So for an hour and a half, he read this script off, and I'm mad, I'm closed off, I have no desire to buy a rainbow, right? Still haven't bought one. We did the 12 thing, got ours for free, because that's the Susan Jennings School of getting stuff for free. Anyways, but when he made that personal connection with me, when we connected on the same problem, and he actually got out silly putty that I've been trying to get out for like a year out of my carpet, that connection all of a sudden changed the whole conversation because now we're on the same page. I'm picking up what he's throwing down, and it made a huge difference, all right? When you come across and you're talking to somebody about Jesus, and you are trying to stick to a script, and you know the pastor's told you exactly what to say in this situation, and you use this line, and you use this, and you use that. I'm not telling you that none of that stuff's true and none of it's bad. I'm just saying when it sounds like you're being generic and you're reading a script, then you come across as insincere, and you lose that personal connection. So it's really important that you are you in these situations. Don't change your personality because now you're going to talk about the gospel and you've got to be somebody completely different. You are who you are because God created you to be that person. And he's opened this door specifically for you. There's a reason that it's Angela talking to the guy and not Rick. Because Rick and that guy probably ain't in a G-Hall. But for some reason, Angela and him they have this connection, and she's able to talk to him and tell him things and joke about something at work or whatever. There's a personal connection there that is needed to be maintained in order to open that door. Because 9 out of 10 people, we're going to get to this in just a moment, but most people, you're not just going to be able to open their door and say, hey, here's a Bible, throw it at them, and then I accepted Jesus because a woman threw a Bible at me. There's got to be some way to open that door and make this connection with somebody, and that's by being you, all right? So 2 Corinthians 5, verse number 5, says this, "He who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee." God has you exactly where he needs you for a reason, right? The people that you come across in your life, you may think it's happenstance, you may think it's just pure coincidence or whatever, but no matter where you're at every day, at work, at home, at school, wherever, you're there for a reason. God's got you there. And he's putting people in your life for a reason that you may have no idea, but God has you where he needs you to be for a reason, and that reason is to share the gospel. Okay? So, be you. Second thing that we need to remember is to tell our story. All right? The gospel message is perfect. There's no need to add to it. There's no need to take away from it. It's always been the same. It's always going to be the same. We rebelled against God, so Jesus came, right? And that's the story. And there's no need to add to it. There's no need to take away from it. It is perfect, and it is convicting and all that stuff. But we get to connect to it through our story, how we tell our story to people. That's what makes it unique. And so when we talk about our story, how Jesus has come into our life and changed us and how he's transformed our life or given us life to start with, all right, we need to not only learn how to talk about that and communicate that with people, but we need to be able to communicate that with people and be excited about it. It should excite us that Jesus changed our life. It should excite us that we were dead and Jesus gave us life. And when we come across people to talk to about him, we should be excited about it, right? Acts 4:20, they said, "For we cannot but speak of what we have seen and heard." They couldn't help but go out and tell the world about what the Spirit was doing in their life and doing in the world as a result of that, right? When Christ comes into our life and takes over, no matter what our backstory is, all right? And we all have different backstories, and we'll get to that in just a second. No matter what's happened to us, but when we experience Jesus and our lives transformed, we should be excited about it. And it's not that we should be excited so that everybody we come in contact with, we tell about Jesus. We should be even more excited than that. Meaning we should be actively pursuing people to tell about Jesus. Y'all see the difference there? We shouldn't be sitting back waiting thinking, "God, I'm at this basketball game. Send me somebody to tell Jesus about." If we were actually as excited as they were in Acts 4, we'd be going up and down the bleachers asking people if they want to hear about Jesus, because we want to tell them about how great Jesus has been to us and how great he's going to be for them if they give their life to him, right? We should be so excited that we are looking for people to tell about Jesus because we're excited about our story. We're excited about what Jesus has done personally in our life. In Acts chapter 26, we have Paul telling his story, and this is the story of all stories, right? When you talk about a testimony, when you talk about somebody giving their life to Jesus, Paul's is top of the list, okay? I myself was convinced that I ought to do many things in opposing the name of Jesus of Nazareth, and I did so in Jerusalem. I not only locked up many of the saints in prison after receiving authority from the chief priests, but when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. And I punished them often in all the synagogues and tried to make them blaspheme. And in raging fury against them, I persecuted them even to the foreign cities. In this connection, I journeyed to Damascus with the authority and commission of the chief priest. At midday, O king, I saw on the way a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, that shone around me and those who journeyed with me. And when we had all fallen to the ground, I heard a voice saying to me in Hebrew language, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads." And I said, "Who are you, Lord?" And the Lord said, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But rise and stand upon your feet. And I have appeared to you for this purpose, to anoint you as a servant and witness to the things in which you have seen me, and to those in which I will appear to you, delivering you from your people and from the Gentiles, to whom I am sending you, to open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan, to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me." So That's an awesome testimony, because Paul's not only killing people, he's killing people for believing in Jesus, all right? These people that are giving their life to Jesus and becoming the church, he's out actively seeking them to kill, to throw in jail. And he says when it gets time for them to be put to death, I cast a vote every time to kill them. I want them gone. I want them out of here, right? I'm actively trying to stop the church by murdering every single person in the church, because if they're dead, they can't talk about Jesus. Paul was the scum of the earth. It doesn't get worse than Paul. We can think about all these bad people we've ever witnessed in our life. You don't get worse than Paul, or at the time Saul, right? Is the fellowship still out there? Still there? I think they're going downstairs to do rec. So he is just absolutely horrendous guy. And he says, but out of nowhere, Jesus shows up and says, Paul, I'm not only going to change your life, instead of persecuting, you're actually going to go out and start to build the church. You're actually going to be the one that goes out and tells how great I am. You're going to go out and witness to people. You're going to reach people, all people, Jews, Gentiles, whoever, and tell them about how great I am. And Saul does a complete 180. Not only is he stopped persecuting the church, he begins to add to the church, right? And we know how that story goes. Paul goes out, writes most of the New Testament, greatest missionary the world's ever seen, does all these fantastic things. But when we think of a testimony, when we think of a story, we think of Paul's. And oftentimes we use, and I've said this, if God can use Saul, then he can certainly use you. You're an alcoholic, that's fine. Jesus used Saul. He persecuted the church. You're strung out on drugs, that's fine. Saul used to kill Christians, right? You feel like you're suicidal, it's okay. God can change your life, because look what he did to Saul. All these things we look at, we compare every story in the Bible, or every story that we know, or anybody we're trying to tell about Jesus, we compare him to Saul and think, your life's nowhere near as bad as Saul, and look what he did. He gave us Paul. Jesus is capable of all this. So we look at that story and we talk about how amazing it is. But then on the flip side of that, we often use this story as a way to convince ourselves that our story is not as exciting or dramatic as Paul. So maybe God can't use my story, right? My story's not this great story about how I was running from the police, or I was locked up in jail, or whatever. So maybe God can't use my story. And you need to understand right now that is a lie from Satan, to try to convince you to be quiet. Because again, his purpose for you is to what? Be quiet. Right. Y'all are all correct. Y'all are being quiet. So anything he can do to convince you of that, he's going to do. So he's told us your story is not important. It's not going to change anybody's life. Please know that your story is powerful, just like it is. Your story is perfect. Okay? Your story is your story, and it's your tool to go out and to reach people for Jesus. You may not have been locked in prison for decades. You may not have been addicted to drugs. You may not have been a part of the drug cartel. You may not have ever held a gun to your head. You may never have been addicted to pornography or whatever. You may have grew up in church, and you've been in church since you was just a baby until now. But whatever your story is, it is important. And not only is it important, it's exciting, and it's dramatic. Because the truth is, there's nothing more dramatic in this world than somebody being dead and being brought to life. And that's you. No matter what your story is, no matter where you were 10 years ago, no matter if you were sitting in church or whether you were sitting in jail, at one point you were dead, and now you're alive. And that's all because of Jesus. And that story, no matter how boring you may think it is, or no matter how much you think it's lacking this dramatic effect, no matter what's going on in that story or what you've convinced yourself, that story is capable, because it's centered around Jesus changing your life, has the capability of reaching somebody to change their life. All right? Your story is enough to reach people. It's up to you to tell it. All right? So we need to be ourselves, be you, tell your story, and most importantly, tell the story of Jesus. All right? Your story is important. Your story is powerful. All right? Your story is life-changing stuff. But it's really important that we remember, as good as your story is, it's just the supporting story to something much bigger. Right? Your story should always be pointing to Jesus. It's always in support of telling the story of Jesus. No matter where the conversation with somebody goes, when you're talking to them, and you may get the chance to tell your story, or you may just get the chance to introduce yourself for 5 seconds. But no matter what, the most important thing that you can do when talking to somebody is to point them to Jesus. So I was on drugs for 20 years, but Jesus. Right? I was alone and I had a gun to my head ready to end it, but Jesus. I was in prison, or I was addicted to this, or addicted to that, or I was raised in church my whole life, but Jesus, all right? It should always go back to Jesus. Your story is yours. It's unique. It's powerful, but it's only powerful because of Jesus, all right? If we leave that part out, you're just rambling. You're just that crazy woman in the grocery store that talks too much, or man. All right. So sometimes when we talk to somebody and we're telling our story and telling people about how great Jesus has been, sometimes we got all the time in the world, sometimes we got 5 minutes, sometimes it's just in passing. All right? So we need to make sure that we get in the part about Jesus. It's the most important part. But don't for a minute think that because you didn't have enough time that it's not going to work. All right? Even if you got 5 minutes, you can tell them about Jesus. In Acts 16, you have Paul and Silas, and they're sitting in prison, and this is the story of them talking to the guard, and he's about to end his life because he knows that he's messed up if the prisoners get out. And Paul says this, and he brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" And they said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household." And they spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all who were in his house. So all Paul said was, hey, believe in the Lord, you'll be saved. It wasn't this long, drawn-out Roman road detail. Now, the Roman roads are great. If you got time to walk through those are life-changing stuff. But sometimes it's as simple as saying, hey, just believe in Jesus. Give your life to Jesus. He's going to change your life. He's going to save you. Just believe in him. Never think that, man, that's way too simple. It's not going to work. Right? I don't have enough time to get into it. It's what I don't have the right words, or my mind's too simplistic. One of the greatest regrets I've ever had in ministry, when I first started out, we went to Collide in Rome with students. And I had this one kid that had been coming, and I knew he had a bad home life. And the night that we shared the gospel, he went to the altar and prayed, and he wanted me to go and talk to him about Jesus. So we went out in the foyer, and we're talking, and we're sitting down, and you guys know I have the tendency to ramble on and get in chasing rabbits and all this stuff, and I'm trying to wrap it up, and I thought I've got to explain every little bit of this gospel to him, and so he'll understand it, because I want to know if he accepts Jesus and it's legit, and I've got to break it all down. And in breaking it all down in my 30-minute gospel presentation, his mom shows up and he has to leave. Never saw the kid again, and it has broke my heart ever since. Right? It doesn't have to be this long, drawn-out, detailed 5-point process of salvation. All Paul did was say, hey, believe in Jesus. He loves you. He's going to change your life, right? And here's what we need to understand. When we get hard on ourselves, when we tell ourselves, hey, I didn't say the right thing, or I didn't know what to really say, I left out the good stuff, or I left out the most important stuff, it's not you that saves people. It's God. You're just simply doing the groundwork. You're just simply giving the message, right? He's the one doing the work, all right? Jesus is preparing his disciples in John 16, and he's telling them, hey, I'm going away, and he says this, nevertheless, I tell you the truth, it is to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the Helper won't come to you. But if I go, I'll send him to you. And when he comes, he will convict the world concerning sin and righteousness and judgment. Jesus is saying, I've got to go so the Spirit's going to be unleashed, and when the Spirit comes, he is going to be who convicts people of their sin. He's going to be the one who convicts them of righteousness and judgment. The Spirit's going to do all the work. You can talk to somebody till you're blue in the face about changing their life, but if you never introduce them to Jesus, if they never meet the Spirit, then they're never going to be convicted of how they're living. It's the most important part, and yet for us, it's the most simple thing, right? We don't have to overcomplicate it. There is no formula. There is no magic phrase that does the trick. It's simply going to somebody, connecting with them in a way that they open that door for you, and then you point them to how great Jesus is. And sometimes it's as simple as saying, hey, believe in Jesus. Give your life to Jesus. Sometimes you'll have the door to open up and say, hey, look, here's what happened. We rebelled, and you can start in Genesis 3, and you can go through the whole thing, and that's fantastic, right? But all you got to do is just go and be you, tell your story, tell the story about Jesus, and the Spirit's going to do all the rest of the work. And here's this on the back of the paper, if you hadn't already found it. Here's something I want you to remember, all right? Because I think that here's another lie that we give ourselves to keep us from ever going out and being aggressive in telling people about Jesus. When we talk to people about the gospel, we need to expect openness. We need to expect people to receive it. And instead of that, we do the opposite. We expect to be turned down. We've told ourselves that if I go and I talk to somebody, they're gonna turn me away right off the bat. But we act even worse than that. We act as if we go and tell the wrong people about Jesus that we're going to get punched in the face 100% of the time. We act like it's that big of a deal. We act like people are so hateful that they're going to punch us in the face for saying Jesus. And that's just simply not the case. Rainer, I read a book, and this is when I first fell in love with reading Thomas Rainer. He did this book on, I think it was like 15,000 people. They went to their house, and they rated people from like a 5, meaning most receptive, most likely to receive the gospel, to 0, I'm absolutely 100% not having that. It was like 5% of the people he talked to out of 15,000 was like at 0. Very few people was just completely against it. Most of the people at least was going to have a conversation with you. In fact, most of them he found it's like they were craving it. They were waiting on it. Just nobody ever brought it to them. We've got to have that mindset. We've got to go into every conversation expecting for them to receive the Spirit. And then be surprised when they say no. And here's why. Going back to Matthew 9, we've been in this text for 3 weeks now, and for this reason. And Jesus went throughout all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into," key phrase, "his harvest." The fields are his. Whoever it is you're coming in contact with, you exist in that moment to tell them about Jesus. But it wasn't by coincidence. It wasn't happenstance. God has been orchestrating all of this, and he has you in that situation for a reason. He has you in his harvest. He has you in his fields doing his work. He didn't just throw you out of the truck and say, go out there and make something happen. He's already working. He's already doing the hard work, the heavy lifting in the background. He's already prepared all of this for us. All we've got to do is show up and be obedient. So with that mindset, if we truly trust that all of this is being worked out and that the Spirit is actually the one that's doing the work, the Spirit is actually the one that's saving and changing lives and convicting them of their sin and convicting them of righteousness and judgment, and we believe that we exist for this moment, and that moment is to share the gospel. If we believe all those things, then we should go into every situation optimistic that they're going to respond by giving their life to Jesus. Because we have this idea in our head that it's a conversation between us and them. And it's not. If they turn away from the gospel, it has nothing to do with you. They're turning away from Jesus. That's a whole different situation that they're going to have to deal with. We need to go into it optimistic and excited, right? Because if we don't, if we treat every situation like, all right, they're going to turn me away, I'm so nervous, I hate this, I hate talking to people, then we're eventually going to convince ourselves not to go. Right? We're going to convince ourselves that we can't do it, and we're not going to pursue anybody for Jesus. We're not going to try anything, and we're just going to continue to be silent, and we're going to continue to give Satan what he wants by stopping our evangelism before it ever gets going. It all starts with having the right mindset. It all starts with being excited, like we talked about in week 1. It all starts with being optimistic that when we tell people about Jesus, Jesus is so good, the Spirit's so strong, He's already done all the work. All we got to do is introduce it. All we got to do is share it with them. All we got to do is make a connection with them, let them open that door, and then we're going in there full guns a-blazing, and we're going to tell them about Jesus, and it's going to be awesome. I promise you, if you had that mindset, you would be amazed by the response. You'd be amazed at how many people are actually seeking something that they don't have. They just don't even know what it is yet. And the reason they don't know about it, the reason they don't have it, is because we're too concerned that we're going to be turned away. We're too concerned that we don't have the knowledge. We're too concerned that we don't have the words. There's no formula to this. It's actually really easy. Just be you. Be the you that God created. He gave you all your traits. He gave you all your characteristics. Even if people tell you it's annoying that you're sarcastic, all that stuff. Somebody out there enjoys sarcasm. That's what you're made for, to go and reach them. Go do it. He's given you your story for a reason. All of your flaws in your past, all the sins that you've struggled with, all the temptation that you fought your entire life, that you feel like you're not good enough for all those things exist so that you can go and reach somebody with the same temptation, with the same sin, with the same flaws. Even the bad stuff that you think is bad is used for His goodness. And most importantly, you was given His story. You know what Jesus can do. You've seen it work in your life. You've seen it turn your life around. You know that you are now a new creature because of Him. That should excite you so much that you're out there looking for people to tell. All we got to do is go. Let's pray. Father, we want to thank You tonight for just, again, allowing us to be here and being able to dig into Your Word, Lord. I've really enjoyed looking at Your gospel and the story of You and how much You love us and how much you did for us, even though we didn't deserve it or ask for it. You were pursuing us. I pray that we return that favor by pursuing people in this world, God, that need to know about You, that are hungry for You, and they may not even know it yet. God, use us in this world and help us to go out and be the laborers and seeking people to bring to You, God. There's plenty. There's no shortage of people that need You. We just got to go. God, if there's anyone here tonight and they don't know You as their Savior, I pray that You move them, that you make them so uncomfortable they have to respond to Your truth, God. There's so much more in this world to live for than what they've experienced up until now, and I pray that You force them to respond to You. God, we love You and we thank You for all that You're doing. Continue to move in this church, continue to move in our lives, and continue to give us opportunities to go out and to talk to others about how great You are. We love You and we thank You. It's in Your name I pray.